Now, if you have this kuntris, then we're up to page Yud Tes on the bottom. And this is a fascinating kasha here in the name of Reb Chaim. I'm very fascinated by this. Tosefes, at the beginning of Arvei Psachim, and we've discussed this on many occasions, emphasizes that when it says Lo Yochal Adam Ad Shechashecha, it's a separate halacha in matzah, that matzah requires chashecha. And Tosefes says that's based on a pasuk with regard to Korban Pesach, v'achlu es habasar b'layla hazeh. And Laila requires that we wait after Tosefes, so we've already accepted on ourselves Tosefes Yontif of Pesach Mibod Yom, but it's not Laila. Now, what we have in front of us is a printed out copy of a manuscript of notes from Rav Moshe Shmuel Shapiro. And he was what you call a Talmud of the Brisk Derech, very much into that style of learning, brisk. And apparently he heard, probably not directly, but indirectly, a tradition in the name of Reb Chaim, and he wrote that down in his notebook, and they published it. He's not alive anymore. He had a yeshiva called Be'er Yaakov, if anybody's familiar with the map of Israel. Reb Chaim asks the following: if Tosefes wants to prove that you have to wait till nightfall in order to eat the matzah, and Tosefes Yontif would not be sufficient, then there was no need for Tosefes to quote the pasuk, "V'achlu es habasar b'layla hazeh." Dal mihachi, drop the pasuk. Typically, you could derive that conclusion from the fact that the Torah says to eat matzah on the 15th of the month of Nisan. And you remember the famous Gzeira Shava Chamisha Sar, but that's not relevant to us right now. But just to jolt your memory about the phrase Chamisha Sar with regard to matzah. Now, you cannot tell me that because you accepted upon yourself Tosefes Yontif on Erev Pesach, when the sun is still in the sky, that now it became the 15th of Nisan. You can't change that. The date remains the same, no matter what you accept upon yourself. So that it's impossible to even entertain the Havamina that you could be Yotzei Matzah on the 14th of Nisan, when the sun is still shining in the sky, just because you accepted upon yourself Tosefes Yontif. The day is certainly the 14th and not the 15th. And in the language of Rav Moshe Shmuel Shapiro, in the name of Reb Chaim, he says, and this you'll see on page Chaf on top, he says, Hiksha Reb Chaim, Lama li, let's underline this, Lama li, L'taima, to be shum the Iskash Pes Matzah LePesach, meaning V'yochlos Habasa B'layla Hazeh, typically, Daha Mitzvahs Matzah Nemra B'leil Tesvav. The mitzvah of matzah is engendered by the date on the calendar, the 15th of Nisan. Badin de Tosefes Yontif lo mahani el ashvuye din Yontif. Okay, you can call it Yontif, but you can't call it the 15th of Nisan. That's an immovable mover. You can't move that. You can't change that. And mitzvahs matzah, the shaychel is man de tesvav. It's the date of tesvav b'nisan that engenders the mitzvah of matzah. Hare pshita dal yidei Tosefes shechal din yontif avlakati leka tesvav. It's not the 15th of Nisan. You can't magically, snap your fingers and say, poof, it's the 15th of Nisan. Until nightfall, it's the 14th of Nisan. He says, Dafka Kiddush Yachal Omer Bojom. Okay, you want to recite Kiddush when it's still light out, that's fine. Delinyan Kiddush Lo Be'inan El Sheyachal Kedushas Yontif. Kedushas Yontif engenders the mitzvah of Kiddush. And V'lo Shaykh Lazman, it doesn't mean that you have to wait till a certain calendar date, emerges or comes into being. V'tzarech even. But now Reb Chaim sort of asks a kash on himself. Well, why did the Torah have to go out of its way in the case of Korban Pesach to say v'yachlos habos b'layla zeh? If the mitzvah of achilas haPesach is on the 15th of Nisan, then it wouldn't cross anyone's mind that after Tosefes Yontif, you'd be able to eat the Korban Pesach. It's not the 15th. Umadid tzorach bepesach atzmo krod v'achlos habos b'layla zeh lo koile inyan kiyum mitzvah d'achilas Pesach. Dezeh pshita shezeh dafka leil tesvav lo mahani al zeh Tosefes Yontif v'rak te'ikar din zeh nemer linyan iser de b'layla v'lo b'yom ki muvur b'Rambam per chesmi Korban Pesach halacha hei ocha mini kizayis slim b'yom arval mitzvah seishnem v'achlos habos b'layla zeh b'layla v'lo b'yom. So Reb Chaim turns to the Rambam in the 8th chapter of Korban Pesach to establish that if you eat a kizayis of tzli, of the Korban Pesach, while it's still light out, you violate a mitzvah saseh. This is what we call a lav haba mechal aseh. And now we don't know when you violate that lav. Maybe you violate that lav only if you eat from the basar tzli when it's not Chag HaPesach, meaning the Kedushas Hayom has not been Chal. But now you've accepted upon yourself Kedushas Hayom, and maybe in that case, even though the mitzvah of Achilas HaPesach has not yet come into being, but nevertheless, the Isur Aseh would not be Chal because it's already Pesach. And for that, I need a pasuk to teach me v'achlos habos b'layla zeh, meaning that until Laila, you're not allowed to eat from basar tzli of the Korban Pesach. So just to summarize, Reb Chaim has what I call a bomb kasha here. Everybody knows this Tosefes, and many Rishonim mimic Tosefes, that the reason why you have to wait till nightfall for matzah on Leil HaPesach is because of the hekesh to Korban Pesach, where the Torah says v'yachlos habasar b'layla zeh. So Reb Chaim says, what kind of business is this? There's no hamamina. It could never even cross your mind that you would be able to eat the Korban Pesach mibod yom after Tosefes Yontif when it's not the 15th of Nisan, but rather the 14th of Nisan, and the Torah commands us to eat the Korban Pesach on the 15th of Nisan. Okay, I don't know that we're going to ever come up with an answer to this question. It's really let's just think for 1 minute. Let's look back for a moment. I don't want to lose the flow. We're really up to Chaf Aleph, page Chaf Aleph. But for a moment, let's go back to Tesvav. Do you remember we learned the Shach on Tesvav? And the Shach wanted to know whether you can count the Omer on a Friday. Let's say Friday's day in the Omer is day 40, let's say. And now it's Friday, so fine. He was makabel on himself Tosefes Shabbos, maybe the whole Kihila was makabel on themselves Tosefes Shabbos, and we're already into the 41st day of the Omer, but it's still light out. So can he count the 40th day of the Omer? Let's say he didn't count that Friday. He reminds himself after L'chuna Ranana. So if you take a look at the Shach, on the first of the very wide lines at the bottom, again, this is on page Tes Vav, he says, V'chein yesh raya misfiras ha'omer, Delo chashvin l'layla, afilu berev Shabbos. So the Shach says that you're allowed to count the Omer on that Friday, despite the fact that you've accepted Tosefes Shabbos. Because it's not yet the next day of the Omer. But let me suggest the following, and please, if you can, tell me whether you think I'm right or wrong. It's just a suggestion on my part. This Shach, which is Os Dalid in the Shach, is going on the Yesh Omrim in the Ramah. And the Yesh Omrim in the Ramah allows a woman to make us a Hefsek Tara that would allow Shabbos to be the first day of Zayin Nekiyim, even though there already was a Tosefes Shabbos. I hope this strikes a familiar chord because we discussed this. Now, I'm trying to say the following, that from the fact that the Shach makes this comment on the second opinion quoted by the Ramah, namely Mutter, that allows her to make the Hefsek Tara, perhaps we can imply the inference here, or the implication of the Ramah, of the Shach, would be that according to the first opinion, that she cannot make a Hefsek Tara once there was Kabbalah Shabbos, then you could not count Sfiras HaOmer once there was Kabbalah Shabbos. Again, just let me emphasize this. The Shach himself seems to be absolutely convinced that even after Tosefes Shabbos, you can still count the Omer of that Friday. There's no question in the Shach's mind about that. I'm just pointing out that not everyone universally, or unanimously, I should say, would accept the Shach. And there may very well be an opinion implicit in the Shach that once you makabel Tosefes Shabbos, Friday is gone, and you can no longer count the day of the Omer of Friday. Again, I would have to research this further to see if what I'm saying is correct. But I think I'm 99% that I'm correct about that. There is another opinion here that would say that just like she cannot make a Hefsek Tara after Tosefes Shabbos, so too you would not be able to count that day of the Omer. Joe?
I'm sorry, but wouldn't you, is it possible to say that a Hefsek Tara with regards to a woman's vest and is different than the other one? I seem to recall something like
so I don't know, Joe, again, I'm not learning now, Hilchas Nida. What the Shach is trying to generate here is a structure. What's the structure? The structure
I understand, but that's what I'm saying.
Are you in the next day? Once you
I know.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to say that you can't use the concept with regard.
So again, Joe, leave out. If I confused you by mentioning Hefsek Tara, leave it out. Make believe I didn't say the words Hefsek Tara. The question is, can you count the Omer of Friday, which is day 40, Lomazogin, when you already, on Friday afternoon, after Plaga Mincha, you already accepted upon yourself Tosefes Shabbos, so the Kila accepted Tosefes Shabbos, would you be able to still count Friday? The Shach says absolutely. No, hands down, no issue about it. What we're pointing out is there seems to be an issue about this. The Shach took one opinion, one approach. He took the high road. But there's also another road that would say that once you makabel Tosefes Shabbos, you can no longer count that day of the Omer. And here I think Reb Chaim would stand up and raise the roof here. How can you possibly entertain a question about whether you can count the 40th day? It's still the 40th day of the Omer. And yet there seems to be an opinion that it's the 41st day of the Omer, and your counting of the 40th day of the Omer of Friday would not be valid. It's meaningless. Why is that any different than eating the matzah on the 14th of Nisan? And Reb Chaim says, well, you can't eat the matzah on the 14th of Nisan because it's not yet the 15th of Nisan. But maybe it already is the 15th of Nisan. Just like it's already the 41st day of the Omer. Okay, I'm just throwing it out there. We're going to have to come back, and there's a very profound sugya. All right, where are we up to now? Does everybody have page Chaf Aleph? If you don't have page Chaf Aleph, I don't know what to say. This is the most important page in the entire Kuntres. And it's the machlokes between the Marshal and the Taz. Now, keep in mind, the Marshal already was long gone, and the Taz quotes the Marshal, whose name was Reb Shlomo Luria, and he attacks him. He apologizes profusely. There's a principle we have, Ein Mashivin Asari Shalo B'Fanav. How could you attack someone who's already gone and he doesn't have the ability to defend himself? Well, let's take a look. What does the Marshal say, and why does the Taz reject it? The case is Shemini Atzeres, which today here in this country means something totally different than what it used to mean in the past. But the question is, accepting upon yourself Tosefes Yontiv on Shemini Atzeres, meaning Shemini Atzeres, like every other Yontiv, lends itself to Tosefes. But the complex situation here is that when you accept upon yourself Shemini Atzeres, the sun is still shining, and now you want to eat a meal. Where do you eat your meal? You got two choices, but they're mutually exclusive. You can't have both. Either you eat the meal in your Sukkah, because it's the 7th day of Sukkot, or you eat your meal in your house because it's already Shemini Atzeres. Comes along the Marshal, and he says, you have to eat in the Sukkah. That's a problem. You already accepted Shemini Atzeres, and now you're going to sit and eat in the Sukkah. In the Talmudic language, in the Gemara in Sukkah, that's called a Tarte Desasre. You cannot eat in the Sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. And certainly you can't make a bracha on Yeshiva B'Sukkah on Shemini Atzeres. And amongst the arguments of the Taz in his objection against the Marshal is that according to the Marshal, there's a Gzeras Tainis. You have to fast between Kabbalas Tosefes Shemini Atzeres and Laila. So let's call it 60 minutes. There's a 60-minute slice of time. I'm just throwing out a number. Between when you are Makabel Tosefes Shemini Atzeres and Laila. And according to Marshal, there's a tinus. You have to fast during that 1 hour. Because if you're going to eat, you got to eat in the Sukkah. And if you can eat in the Sukkah, then you involve yourself in a Tarte Desasre. By eating in the Sukkah, on Shemini Atzeres because you have accepted upon yourself Shemini Atzeres. And the Taz raises the roof and he says, where did we find the Xeris Tainus over here? Show me some sugya in the Gemara where you're supposed to fast after Kabbalah's Tosefes Shemini Atzeres, because chas v'sholom, if you eat, you'll get into a problem of tarti desasha because you'll have to eat in the Sukkah.
I have a question.
David?
Why can't the guy just say shahakal or ber praise or priyadama? I mean, you're talking about mezaitis and bread only is the problem. There's what to eat without that.
So what do you
per se?
So what do you advocate? He eats in the Sukkah?
No, you're not going to eat in the sukkah for those things. If you make a suda, you're right. Then you have to. But if you want to, I don't know, eat an apple, let's say, right? You can eat that outside the sukkah. It doesn't require shita sukkah.
Oh, okay.
So there's not tinus per se. I mean,
yeah, okay.
You can't wash your bench. That's all.
Yeah, he can eat mini de turgamino,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he doesn't have to.
City or tinus is a bit much, I think.
But I'll tell you the truth, David. I don't know if he can make kiddush, because kiddush requires kfiyah suda.
Okay, fine.
You have to look in the poskim and see what they say about drinking a revius yain outside the sukkah on sukkahs. I doubt if they're going to allow that.
Okay.
So imagine you makabel on yourself Tosefes Shemini Atzeres.
Right.
Obviously, you're allowed to make kiddush. Nobody questions that. But the Marshal is saying, make kiddush in the sukkah. It's still the seventh day of Sukkot.
Right.
And you can't change that, says the Marshal. Now, when the Taz, in this very long piece here, presents his own shita against the Marshal, he writes the following. And the print is a little bit small. So I'm going to count from the bottom, from the end of this paragraph going up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines up from the bottom. And he writes, Devadai, Misha Mosif Michol ala Kodesh, and that's a mitzvah doraisa, right? Tosefes Yontiv is a mitzvah doraisa. Shehu osel pi atzivui shel Torasenu. He's fulfilling the mandate of the Torah by accepting upon himself Shemini Atzeres early. Kvar cholaf v'holach mimenu. Now, if you stop here, again, this is this is a violation of every rule in the game to stop in the middle of a sentence. But I'm going to do it for myself. He says, Kfar cholaf v'holach mimenu. I'm going to stop there at the word mimenu. Kfar cholaf v'holach mimenu. The next word is hayom. I'm skipping a word, if you notice, which is absolutely illegitimate. Because if you read the Taz, Kfar cholaf mimenu hayom, the Taz is saying something unbelievable. That once you makabel on yourself Tosefes, it's no longer the day. You're entering into the night. Now, again, put your finger on the place, and let's go back to Beis Medrash Gavoa. And Beis Medrash Gavoa, on page Yud, says the following. On the right column on the bottom, he says, just 1 second, let me see if I can find the words. Yeah, here it is. On the 5th line, there's an aleph. If you look at the aleph, he says, Begeder Tosefes Shabbos v'yontif. Laharimi kurbil, again, keep in mind that Tosfos in Psachim, Ari Psachim quotes the Rimi Korbil that you're allowed to eat Yesuda of Shabbos or Yontif after Tosefes. Nischalef hayom. Do you see those two words? Nischalef hayom. V'nase yom haba. Now look, Rabbosai, I don't know who wrote this, and it's not like I'm quoting to you, something that's written in the Gedolei Yisrael. It's a group of scholars in Lakewood Yeshiva. But for a moment of time, let's take this very seriously. He says, Nischalef hayom v'nase yom haba. And this is magic. You snap your fingers, and it's tomorrow. It's no longer today. Nischalef hayom. V'nase yom haba. Like I told you a story about the brisker of Pamir Shabbos, right? So I'm just saying, if you read these words in the Taz, he seems to be saying exactly what the Lakewood Yeshiva says in the Rimi Korbil, Kfar nischalef holach mimen, meaning the day is already gone. Let's just add the words v'nase yom haba. Add that into the Taz. I mean, that might answer Reb Chaim's kasha. Because you could eat the Korban Pesach after Kabbal's Tosefes Yontif, because it's already the 15th of Nisan. And you could not count Sfiras HaOmer on Friday as the 40th day when you were Makabel Tosefes Shabbos or Yontif, because it's already Nase Yom Haba. So it's already the 41st day of the Omer. I mean, all this is begetter dok v'tishkach, by the way. I don't believe this for one split second. And now let's read the word that I skipped in the Taz. Cholaf kvar cholaf ve'cholach mimenu chovas hayom. What does he mean by chovas hayom? Yeshiva b'sukkah. See, here's an interesting question. What generates the mitzvah of Sukkah? Is it the Kedushas Hayom, or is it the day of Sukkot, Yom Shel Sukkot? The Marshal, no doubt, understands Yom Shel Sukkot. And even if you were makabel on yourself Tosefes, it's still the 7th day of Sukkot. You got to eat your meal in the Sukkah. The Taz, from his point, says that the chiyuv of Sukkah is a result and is generated by the Kedushas Hayom. You've already accepted upon yourself the Kedushas Hayom of Shemini Atzeres. Then the Kedushas Hayom of Sukkot is gone. And with it goes down the tubes the mitzvah of Sukkah. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw this in Rav Gusman's Sefer with regard to mitzvah seishas man grum. Kuncha say shiurim al masechta kiddush. Okay, that's just for my own. So, Rabosai, what would be your intuitive response, knee-jerk reaction? Is the mitzvah sukkah generated by Yom Sukkos or by Kedushas Hayom of Sukkos? Well,
I'd say Kedushas.
Oh, so you're with the Taz. And therefore you can switch that Kedushas Hayom because the Torah commands you to be makabel on yourself Tosefes min hachol al hakodesh of Yom Shmini Atzeres. So now the Kedushas Hayom is Shmini Atzeres. No
But
mitzvah.
that's different. That's different. That's different than a Sfiras Omen.
Right. Sphere Omen, it's not going to work. You know, the Taz points out another thing, that according to the Marshal, any time Yontif will fall out on a Friday, you have a problem. Because going into Shabbos, you're makabel on yourself Tosefes Shabbos. And now you eat your meal. Are you going to say Yalav V'yov or you're not going to say Yalav V'yov? According to Marshal, you have to say Yalav V'yov, just like you have to sit in Sukkah. But it's Shabbos. There's no Yalav V'yov on Shabbos. The Taz points out here that the Marshal drags us through many, many issues. And it's interesting the way he phrases it. This is 4 lines before the end of the paragraph. He says, B'shah shekibel kedushas yontif shel Shmini Atzeres shebo soser mitzvah sukkah. I have no doubt this is a pun on words, deliberately. He used the word soser. Soser is a classic word in the context of sukkah. You know, all over the Masechta, you can look up the word soser. Soser Sasukkah. He's saying that through Kabbalah's Kedushas Hayom of the Yontif of Shmini Atzeres, he's soser the Sukkah. And the mitzvah of Sukkah is gone, to be replaced by the mitzvah to eat in your house, generated by Shmini Atzeres. But look at his language here. He writes, the Yeshlo Yecholes Lasos Kain. He has the authority and the power to terminate the mitzvah of Sukkah. Pshita. Shetekef Nichnas. Just 1 second. So it means that the Torah tells him to be makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres, and therefore the day is now sanctified with the Kedusha of Shmini Atzeres, and therefore he has the power to be soser the Sukkah. But then if you skip a few words, he says, Vahavi kamo belayla. Now again, you know, does he mean the Lakewood Yeshiva here? He says, Havi kamo belayla, that kvar holach hayom, v'nasa yom hamochar? I don't know. He uses the word himo layla. Kimo Lila. It's not really Lila, but it has the din of Lila, and it's mafkia the mitzvah of Sukkah. No fasting. We're going to eat in the house, even though it's the 7th day of Sukkot. But the kedusha of Sukkot was now undermined and vitiated and negated, only to be replaced by the kedusha of Shmini Atzeres. Now look at the next phrase in the Taz. He's like a poet. He writes down, Peh HaKadosh. Who is the Peh HaKadosh? You're all on mute, so I guess you can't answer that. Anybody unmute themselves, just tell me, who is the Peh HaKadosh? The Eibishter. HaPeh HaKadosh Yis'ale Baruch Hu. Shetziva olav mitzvah sukkah This is what we call a pesha or a pesha itir. It's the Peh HaKadosh that commanded him to fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah. He a Peh HaKadosh shehitir lo li'achar shekibel olav Shmini Atzeres. The same Peh HaKadosh that commanded him to eat in Sukkah and not outside the Sukkah, commanded him to accept upon himself Shmini Atzeres. And undermine and terminate the mitzvah of Sukkah. In other words, the Taz concedes that there's an absolute conflict here, irreconcilable. On the one hand, the Torah says sit in the Sukkah all 7 days. On the other hand, the Torah says be makabel on yourself Tosefes Shemini Atzeres. So on the one hand, the Torah commands me to eat in Sukkah, and then the Torah turns around and says, eat outside the Sukkah. Eat in your house. So the Torah itself is encroaching on its own mandate, on its own mitzvah. The mitzvah of Sukkah gets cut down like a tree that gets cut down at its trunk in order to make room for Shmini Atzeres. It's almost as if Rabbosai Shmini Atzeres begins on Sukkot. We understand that Sukkot ends and you pass on the baton to Shmini Atzeres, but there's no overlap between Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres. Comes along the Taz and he says you can take Shmini Atzeres and clone it onto Sukkot. My nafkamina, you mafkia the mitzvah of Sukkah. Eat in the house and enjoy your meal. It's a Shmini Atzeres meal.
Rav, would you not say that? I'm just wondering why he's using that the way of saying it. Why doesn't he use the idea? I mean, that we have, because we have control over the calendar, because Hashem gave us control over the calendar. We put the kedusha on the day, so therefore, every time when we change it from one yontif to the other, it's because of that control that Hashem gave us. Would you not say that that's what he's getting at?
But keep in mind, Joe, everything you say is true, but we have to add the Taz here. I'll tell you why. Because the Torah gave the authority to Bezdin HaGadol to determine the Zmanim.
Right.
I'm just me, myself, and I. And I'm being Kabbalah Tosefes. I'm not a Bezdin. I can't change I can engender the Kedushas Hayom for myself of Shmini Atzeres, but not for you, or him, or anybody else. It's really a pella when you think about it. All of Shas is divided into 6. And there are very complex dinim in Nezikin and in Kodshim. But Zmanim, Zmanim we think is pretty simple and straightforward. Glatt, it's smooth. No, Zmanim is also complicated. Because I'm going to be Makabel Tosefes Shmini Atzeres, you're not. And for me, it's no longer Sukkos, because the Torah gave me the authority to terminate the mitzvah of Sukkos by being Makabel on myself Tosefes Shmini Atzeres. It's mind-boggling. On the other hand, take the Marshal. It's also a little bit complicated, to say the least, because then the Marshal says, you know what? Go ahead, be Makayim the mitzvah Tosefes, in this case, Shmini Atzeres, but don't you dare eat a meal, because if you eat a meal, you're involved in a tat to the sasser, because you're Chayim in the mitzvah of Sukkos. But how could you be Chayim in the mitzvah of Sukkos when you're Chayim in the mitzvah of Shmini Atzeres that requires you to eat in the house? Don't eat it all. Very simple solution. Be Makabel Tainus. Tainus on Shmini Atzeres. Okay, it's only an hour, but So what would the Taz say about Sfiras HaOmer on the 40th day of the Omer on a Friday after he was makabel on himself Tosefes Shabbos? The Lakewood Yeshiva might argue the following. He can count 41, but he can't count 40. Because kfar nischalef hayom v'nasa yom hamochros. Well, we would say no. And Joe, you pointed this out very well before. Sfiras HaOmer has nothing to do with Kedushas Hayom. When does the Taz say it's already Lila? That's when you makabel on yourself Kedushas Hayom. And now all your obligations are to be seen in the light of that new Kedushas Hayom that you accepted upon yourself. But in terms of the Omer, even the Taz would admit that it's still day 40 and it's not day 41. And I'm so curious to know two things. Number one, did the Taz ever address the question in his writings of Sfira Zayin Nikiyim on a Friday after Tosefes Shabbos? And can you still count the Omer of Friday after Tosefes Shabbos of the next day of the Omer? What we do know is that the Taz allows you to eat a Suda Shabbos on Erev Shabbos, Mibod Yom, after Tosefes Shabbos. And that's on page Chaf Beis. But once again, we have to be very careful, because that depends on Kedushas Hayom. The Seudah of Shabbos is generated by Kedushas Hayom. You've already accepted upon yourself Kedushas Hayom. Go ahead and eat your Seudah. But the Taz himself admits that there is a dissenting view. So if you look where the pointer is in the Taz, he says, I'm not sure what did anybody tell me what this abbreviation is? Oh, maybe Sefer Trumos, maybe. Shebelel Shabbos tzarich sheyeh gemara asuda b'layla. Need the Gemara Suda Balayla. V'rashal noag shalo lechol b'leil Shabbos halalayla. V'lo near it. So Taz disagrees. Kevin the Tosefes Michol al Kodesh Hu Doraisa al Korchach Yotza al Ken Yotza Shapir Afilu Gmark Sudoso Kodem Alai. So again, the Taz is very consistent. If you're makabel on yourself Tosefes Shemini Atzeres, it's already Shemini Atzeres, and the Kedushas Hayom of Sukkah is gone. No mitzvah of Sukkah. And on Erev Shabbos, you makabel on yourself Tosefes Shabbos. You can eat your Suda, which is generated by the Kedushas Shabbos. You've already accepted Kedushas Shabbos. So I'm just curious what the Taz would say about Sfiras HaOmer and Zayin Nikiyim, two mitzvos which have nothing to do with Kedushas Hayom. I don't know where to find an answer to those questions.
I have a question.
Yeah, David.
According to the Taz, what would happen if the first day of Sukkot, the person is makabel yontif earlier and eats in the Sukkah before it's dark? So he's not yoytzi because he's tesvav, right? You're saying it's a special case, but otherwise he would be able to do it.
Well, wait. So let me first give you my gut reaction, my knee-jerk response to your question, and then we'll ask your kasha on what I have to say. I would say for sure that once you makabel on yourself Tosefes Yontif on Erev Sukkot, you can sit in Sukkah, make a bracha, and be Mekayim the mitzvah. Comes along David Spiegel and he asks me, how could that be? The mitzvah is on Chambisha. We're back to Reb Chaim's business. That tepaklei, you don't need all the dinim of matzah. You know that the mitzvah of matzah is engendered by tesvav. The mitzvah of sukkah is engendered by tesvav. It's not yet tesvav.
Yeah, but the word be'er is in the chumash, right?
I mean, again, according to Lakewood, you're okay. Because according to Lakewood, the Taz means to say kvar chalaf hayom v'nasa yom l'mocha. So it's already tesvav. And that would answer Reb Chaim's kash. But obviously, we are very hesitant to go down that route. So now we have your kash. How could you eat in sukkah mibod yom? It's not your tesvav.
Didn't we say last time that tesvav had a emphasized tesvav because it is tesvav? So it brought an extra factor into it. It's not just the kedushas hayom. By saying the day itself, it brought in that it had to be on that day. We spoke about this last week, I think.
I don't know about last week, but we mentioned it just a few minutes ago in Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim says you have to eat the matzah on tesvav.
Right.
And therefore, Tosefes Pesach is not going to help you to make it into Tesvav. You can't snap your finger, magically make it into Tesvav. And
Right.
David is saying then, on the flip side of the Gzerah Shava Tesvav, you have Sukkah. And even though he's makabel on himself Tosefes Yontif of Sukkahs, it's not yet Tesvav.
Well, I'm only saying because the chumash is be'erev, right? It's dafka be'erev. Regardless of what you do, it's still got to be be'erev, meaning dark.
So David's right that for the first night you can't do it. You can't eat. You
I don't
cannot eat.
believe that. Not for 1 minute. Unless you prove me I'm wrong. And
Okay,
you may be
because
able
we
to prove me to be wrong. Let me ask Yudi a question. Yudi, do you know of anyone who says that on the first night of Sukkot, you have to wait till nightfall to eat in the Sukkah? Does anybody say that?
I think Shulchan Aruch does, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, can you find that for me?
I have to look at it. But I remember hearing something like this years ago. I think it's in Shulchan Aruch somewhere.
I mean, that seems to be the conclusion of this whole discussion.
No, see, not because there's no kedusha to yoin, but it's a special case by Sukkot and Pesach that's got to be be'erev.
Correct. Oh,
But you still have you just can't eat it. It's a special case.
Because what we said about Pesach is that he can start his Suda Mibod Yom after Tosefes, just he has to make sure to eat a kazayis matzah after nightfall. So let's go back to Sukkot for a moment. He wants to eat a Sudas Yontif of Sukkot. He wants to Mekayim the mitzvah of Vasukas Teshu Shivas Yomim, but it's not yet Tesvav. So how can he be make a bracha on the 14th of Tishrei on the mitzvah of Yeshiva B'Sukkah? Rebbeinu Shalom, it's the 14th, it's not the 15th. You stumped me, David. You got me stumped. It would seem that the logical conclusion is that we have to wait till nightfall to eat in Sukkah. That has to be in the poskim. Can you look it up? Yudi, you have a Shulchan Aruch there?
Yeah, I'm looking for it now.
Yeah, look on the Mitzvah Yeshiva B'Sukkah. I think it's probably the,
Maybe a
like
Mishnah
the
Berurah,
first
I remember something like that.
I have a Mishnah Berurah here somewhere.
If you want to get it on, take a look.
Tov Reish Chaf Hey. Let's see.
Okay. Should I go get mine?
Fresh Lamed Test,
Tov Reish Lamed Tes.
Sifa, Yud Aleph.
Okay.
No, there's no Sif Yud Aleph. Hold on.
Takes out Mitzvah Yeshiva B'Sukkah. Blah blah blah.
It's supposedly a Magen Avram, Fresh Lamed Test, Ois
Gimel.
Yud Aleph, and the Magen Avram.
Rishona ad Shevad Laila.
Where is it? Number Gimel? Sif Gimel?
Sif Gimel in the Ramah.
Lo yochal b'layla rishon ad sheyehei vadei layla. And who's he quoting? See who he's quoting, the Ramah.
Is there a Magen Avram Ois Yud Aleph there?
Well, yeah, I don't have a Shulchan Aruch. I just have Mishnah Berurah. Who has a? You have a Shulchan Aruch?
I don't, but I looked this up. I got it on the reference online, but I don't have a Shulchan Aruch.
Magen Avram.
But no, I think Yudim has a Shulchan Aruch. No, Yudi?
The Bir Halacha quotes the Magen Avram.
Does anybody have a Magen Avram? Okay, it doesn't matter.
The Miluim in the Dirshu actually brings Rav Chaim.
Is it this Reb Chaim that we spoke about?
Yeah. Shmatzain Shaykh Loichel V'nei Alang V'nei Shem Mitzvasa Eina El B'Layla V'Ein Den Tosefes Yantiv Yochel La'afoich Es Hayoim L'Layla. In the Miluim on number 33 in the back.
All right, you'll have to take a picture of it and send it to us.
Okay.
I don't know, I'm missing something here. Anyway, the Ramah requires Vade Laila. But then the Mishnah Berurah and the Bir Halacha adds Vehine. Again, it's a little bit small for my eyes. 1 second. Vehine Kiddush Hayachol Lasos Mibod Yom. Tas. Alayayin. One second. When he recites Kiddush Mibod Yom, he's going to say Leishev Basukah.
I was wondering about that. Sukkah, right?
Isn't that a paradox? He's going to recite Leishev Basukah.
Not only that, but skip Makom Suda. There's no Makom Suda yet because you're not Mechuyev Sukkah yet. How's it Makom Suda?
Okay, so that's a little less of a problem in the sense that it might be considered Makom Sud al Shema Osid, maybe. It's going to be Makom Sud. I don't know.
Well, there's a half second if you do
I'm
that.
just bothered by how he can make a bracha. What do you mean Leishev Basukah? It's the 14th of Tishrei. How can you say Leishev Basukah?
Yeah. Bunch of questions.
I have another question. I don't know if it bothers you. It bothers me. The Machaber doesn't say a word about this. Mitoch lava tashmei hein. Does it mean that the Machaber doesn't care one way or the other when you eat your meal? You can eat your meal when it's still light out. And then we're back to David's question. How could you eat the meal when it's still light out if it's the 14th of Tishrei and not the 15th of Tishrei? And also, even the Mishnah Berurah is a little bit strange, because the Mishnah Berurah says, why do you need Vade Laila? Take a look at the Mishnah Berurah number Chafhei. He says, Dum Yudachilas Matzah. So he's quoting the pasuk V'yachlas Abasar B'Laila Zeh.
Yep.
And Reb Chaim would stand up and yell and scream, forget about V'yachlas Abasar B'Laila Zeh. The Torah says it commands us to eat in the Sukkah on the 15th of Tishrei. It's not yet the 15th of Tishrei.
Yeah.
So why does the Mishnah Berurah have to stretch his arm out to Dumya de Matzah? Forget about Dumya de Matzah. Which means V'yachlos Abasar B'Laila Zeh. Dumya de Matzah, which is Dumya de Pesach. It's a whole Chad Gadya. What do you need that for? You need Tesvav.
So if the Mishnah Berurah holds that Kedusha Zayim really takes effect, and the day really is changed, but it's just a technical situation here that you need Dafka Laila no matter what.
And maybe that's the Machaber Shita that if there was if not for this Vade Laila business, which is through the Hekdesh and all that matzah business, forget about it. Then it depends upon Kedusha Sayom.
Yeah.
You accept it upon yourself Kedusha Sayom, and mainly have the mitzvah of Sukkah.
And you can't,
even though it's not
I
mean, it really all comes back to this Reb Chaim that we studied today. And Reb Chaim is asking, how can you eat the matzah Mibod Yom when it's the 14th of Nisan and not the 15th of Nisan? Forget about Dumya de Matzah, Dumya de Pesach. Forget about that. Tosefes says, no, you got to wait until it gets dark because maybe when the Torah, again, what I'm going to say is it's pretty ridiculous, but maybe when the Torah says Tesvav, it means the Kedusha Sayom of Sukkot. So therefore, the Taz is going to say that once you makabel on yourself Tosefes Shemini Atzeres, it's the Kedushas Hayom of Shemini Atzeres, and the mitzvah of Sukkah is generated by Kedushas Hayom. Do you see where the Taz would shed a good light, a perfect light on the Mechaber here? If we assume, David, that the Mechaber would allow you to eat your meal of Sukkahs in the Sukkah with a bracha Asher Kidshanim Tzoleshem B'Sukkah, even though the sun is still shining. This fits in very well with the Taz, because the Taz is saying that the mitzvah Sukkah will terminate when the Kedushas Hayom terminates, because you accepted upon yourself the Kedushas Hayom of Shemini Atzeres, and even though the Taz can't deny that it's still the 14th, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. I mean to say it's still Shvi Shal Sukkos, right? 7 plus 15 is 22. So it's Chav Beis, and it's still, but nevertheless, the mitzvah of Sukkah depends upon and is generated by the Kedushas Hayom. If the Kedushas Hayom terminate, imagine if the middle of Sukkot, the Kedushas Hayom would somehow, like the Anani HaKavod would just rise up to the sky. You would not have a mitzvah of Sukkah, even though it's still Sukkot. So I'm just pointing out that and I only see this here because of David, that we should connect the Taz with the Shulchan Aruch. And we should assume that the Shulchan Aruch was very deliberate by omitting this halacha. The Ramah is yelling and screaming, what do you mean? How could you possibly sit in Sukkah when it's the 14th of Tishrei? Or as the Mishnah Berurah says, how can you possibly eat in Sukkah when it's not Lila like matzah? Dumya de matzah.
But you can, else the Kedusha, but you don't have Erev.
That's what I was saying, yeah.
That's David's.
Again, that's what we're saying here, Bobby, that somehow whatever it says in the Torah about the day,
you can't argue, you can't say that it's Erev. You have the Kedushas Yom Tov.
No, but I'm asking you, Bobby, let's go back for a moment to the Taz. What time is it? We might have to stop.
You have to stop.
All right, well, I'll give you another 2-3 minutes, okay, if you can stay. The Taz says it's the 7th day of Sukkot. No doubt about it. And you were given the authority by the Torah, vested in you, to remove the mitzvah of Sukkah on Sukkot. And how? Through a new Kedushas Hayom, which replaces the old Kedushas Hayom. So the old Kedushas Hayom of Sukkot is gone, even though on your calendar it's still the 7th day of Sukkot. And if we take the Taz and apply it to the beginning of Sukkot, we could say that even though it's not on the calendar the first day of Sukkot, but you have the Kedushas Hayom, you'll have the mitzvah of Sukkah, and you recite the bracha L'Shem B'Sukkah.
But not Erev. You don't have Erev.
That's right, yeah.
Again, why does Erev bother you more than the fact that it's not the 15th of Nisa of Tishrei?
Because I don't care about the 15th.
You know what I'm saying?
I care about Kedushas Hayom. I can add Kedushas Hayom.
No, I'm saying if the Taz is adding Kedushas Hayom when it's not yet the 15th of the month, then you could say that be'erev tochlu matzos or what?
No, but you still can't say it's Erev. That's a different idea. You can say that there's a Kedushas Hayom, but it's not Erev yet. It's not physically Erev.
So again, I just want to point out to you that Reb Chaim is not bothered by Erev. He says, forget about Erev. Even if you didn't have the problem of Erev, you have a much more fundamental problem. And that is, it's not the 15th of the month. How could you eat matzah on the 14th of Nisan? And therefore, Reb Chaim would scream and yell, how could you sit in Sukkah on the 14th of Tishrei? And the Taz is going to answer Kedushas Hayom. And Bobby's going to say, all right, Kedushas Hayom ahin, Kedushas Hayom aher, but it's a little bit strange because the Torah requires Lila.
I'm just supporting David.
All right, we'll stop here.
This
sugya is, you talk about Zmanim, as I said before, you think Zmanim is just simple.
Nah.
Every part of the Torah is challenging. All right, gentlemen, have a great week. Next week, we're starting an hour an hour later on our
3:15 your time.
not going to affect you at all.